Hey there, you're looking kind of cute. Don't forget to subscribe and check out all my other socials. Enjoy. Xander trudged down the sidewalk, his shoulders hunched against the chill. Fallen leaves crunched beneath his feet, a vibrant tapestry of reds and golds carpeting the ground. He paused at the crosswalk, waiting for the light to change, and caught his reflection in a nearby storefront window. A sigh escaped his lips as he took in his appearance. Tousled brown hair, day-old stubble darkening his jaw, rumpled flannel shirt hanging loosely over faded jeans. Not exactly the picture of put-together professionalism he strived for as a graphic designer. But today was Saturday, a rare day off from the grind of client meetings and looming deadlines. The light changed and Xander crossed the street, making his way to the local coffee shop where he was meeting some friends. As he pushed open the door, the rich aroma of freshly brewed coffee enveloped him. He spotted his friends at a corner table and waved as he approached. "There he is," called out Mike, raising his mug in greeting. "We were starting to think you'd bailed on us." Xander slid into an empty chair. "And miss out on overpriced coffee and your sparkling wit? Never." The usual round of good-natured ribbing commenced as Xander signaled the barista for his regular order. Talk turned to their plans for the evening, a few rounds at their favorite bar to celebrate Mike's recent promotion. "First round's on me," Mike announced, "but I've got a little proposition to make things interesting." The others leaned in, intrigued. Mike had a notorious penchant for ill-advised bets and dares, which had landed them in some amusing predicaments over the years. "All right, I'm listening," said Xander, eyebrow raised. "What's the stakes this time?" Mike's grin widened. "Simple. Whoever taps out first tonight has to show up to the bar next weekend in full drag. I'm talking dress, makeup, the works." A chorus of groans and protests erupted from the table. Xander shook his head, chuckling. "You can't be serious. There's no way I'm risking that." "What's the matter? Afraid you can't hang?" Mike waggled his eyebrows. "Come on, where's your sense of adventure?" Pride warred with common sense as Xander weighed his options. He could hold his liquor better than most, and the thought of his friends dolled up was admittedly hilarious. How bad could it be? "Fine," he relented. "I'm in, but when you're stumbling around in heels next week, don't come crying to me." The rest of the afternoon passed in a blur of laughter and half-baked schemes. As evening fell, they made their way to O'Malley's, their usual watering hole. The night started off tame enough, with the first couple rounds going down smooth. But as the hours ticked by and the drinks kept flowing, Xander found himself struggling to keep pace. His vision swam as he tried to focus on the dartboard, missing the bullseye by a mile. The room tilted alarmingly as he made his way back to the table, collapsing into his chair with a groan. I think I'm done," he slurred, pushing away his half-full glass. "You win, Mike. I'll see you guys next week." The cool night air helped clear his head somewhat as he stumbled home. As he fell into bed, still fully clothed, his last coherent thought was a vague sense of dread about what he'd agreed to. The week passed in a flurry of activity as Xander threw himself into work, trying to forget about his impending humiliation. But all too soon, Saturday rolled around again. He stared at his closet, realizing he had no idea where to even begin with assembling an outfit. After an hour of fruitless searching, he admitted defeat and called his sister for help. She arrived bearing several bags of clothes and accessories, barely containing her amusement at his predicament. "All right, little brother," she said, dumping the contents onto his bed. "Let's turn you into a beautiful butterfly." What followed was a crash course in the arcane arts of female transformation. Xander marveled at the array of products and tools required. Foundations and concealers, brushes and sponges, eyeliners and mascaras. His sister worked methodically, explaining each step as she went. "The key is blending," she said, dabbing at his face with a makeup sponge. "You want it to look natural, not caked on." Xander squirmed as she applied mascara, fighting the urge to blink. "How do women do this every day? It's torture." His sister laughed. "Practice makes perfect. Now hold still while I do your lips." Finally, after what felt like hours, she pronounced him finished. Xander turned to face the mirror, jaw dropping at his reflection. The stranger staring back at him was undeniably feminine, long lashes framing bright eyes, lips glossy and full, cheekbones softly contoured. "Wow," he breathed. "I look gorgeous," his sister finished, beaming with pride at her handiwork. "Now let's get you dressed." They settled on a modest black dress that hugged his newly created curves, paired with low heels. "No need to break an ankle on your first outing," his sister had advised. A long brunette wig completed the transformation. Xander twirled experimentally, watching the skirt flare out. Despite his initial reluctance, he found himself oddly exhilarated by the change. There was something freeing about stepping into a completely different persona. "So," his sister asked, "what's your name going to be?" Xander considered for a moment. "Gracie," he decided. "I look like a Gracie, don't you think?" The walk to O'Malley's was an exercise in self-consciousness. Gracie, was hyper-aware of every glance, every double take from passers-by. But as no one seemed to clock him as anything other than female, his confidence grew with each step. He paused outside the bar, taking a deep breath to steel his nerves. Then, head held high, he pushed open the door and sashayed inside. The reaction from his friends was immediate and uproarious. Mike's jaw nearly hit the floor, while the others alternated between stunned silence and howls of laughter. "Holy shit," Mike finally managed. "You actually did it, and you look damn good, actually." Gracie struck a pose, batting his eyelashes coyly. "Why, thank you, kind sir. May I join you, gentlemen, for a drink?" The ice thus broken, the evening devolved into raucous fun. Gracie played up the femme fatale act, speaking in an exaggerated, breathy voice and flirting shamelessly with his friends. To his surprise, he found himself genuinely enjoying the role play. As the night wore on, Gracie excused himself to powder his nose. In the relative privacy of the restroom, he examined his reflection critically. The makeup was holding up well, and he had to admit the overall effect was quite striking. Lost in contemplation, he didn't notice the door opening behind him. A deep voice startled him from his reverie. "Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't realize anyone was in here." Gracie whirled around, coming face to face with a tall, handsome stranger. The man's eyes widened appreciatively as he took in Gracie's appearance. "No worries," Gracie replied, pitching his voice higher. "I was just leaving." He made to brush past the newcomer, but a gentle hand on his arm stopped him. "Wait," the man said. "I don't mean to be forward, but could I buy you a drink?" Gracie's heart raced. This wasn't part of the plan. But something in the stranger's warm brown eyes made him hesitate. "I'd like that," he heard himself say. "I'm Gracie." "Chris," the man replied with a dazzling smile. "Pleasure to meet you, Gracie." They made their way to the bar, where Chris ordered them both cocktails. As they sipped their drinks, conversation flowed easily. Chris was charming and attentive, hanging on Gracie's every word. For his part, Gracie found himself opening up, sharing anecdotes and opinions he'd never voice as Xander. As the evening progressed, Gracie became increasingly aware of the growing attraction between them. Chris's hand brushed his arm as he laughed at a joke, lingering just a moment too long to be accidental. Their eyes met over the rim of Gracie's glass, and the intensity of Chris's gaze sent a shiver down his spine. "Would you like to get out of here?" Chris asked softly. "Maybe go for a walk?" Gracie hesitated. This had already gone much further than he'd intended. But the thought of ending the night now, of never seeing Chris again, filled him with an inexplicable sadness. "I'd love to," he replied. They strolled through the quiet streets, the cool night air a welcome respite from the stuffy bar. Chris's hand found Gracie's, their fingers intertwining naturally. They talked about everything and nothing, their hopes, their fears, their dreams for the future. As they reached a small park, Chris tugged Gracie to a stop beneath a streetlight. His free hand came up to cup Gracie's cheek, thumb tracing the line of his jaw. "Gracie," he murmured, "may I kiss you?" Time seemed to stand still as Gracie's mind raced. This was his last chance to come clean, to explain the whole ridiculous situation. But the thought of shattering this perfect moment was unbearable. Instead, he leaned in, pressing his lips to Chris's in a soft, sweet kiss. When they parted, both slightly breathless, Chris's smile could have lit up the night sky. "Can I see you again?" he asked. Gracie nodded, not trusting himself to speak. They exchanged numbers, and with one final, lingering kiss, went their separate ways. As Xander removed his makeup that night, scrubbing away the last traces of Gracie, his mind whirled with conflicting emotions. Guilt warred with exhilaration, shame with a newfound sense of freedom. He fell into a fitful sleep, dreams filled with swirling skirts and gentle brown eyes. The next few weeks passed in a haze of confusion and self-discovery. By day, Xander went about his normal routine, work, gym, hanging out with friends, but his thoughts constantly drifted to that magical night as Gracie. He found himself lingering in the cosmetics aisle at the drugstore, fingers itching to recreate his sister's artistry. YouTube tutorials became a secret addiction, filling his browser history alongside his usual tech reviews and sports highlights. One lazy Sunday afternoon, home alone with no plans, Xander gave in to temptation. He carefully applied foundation, fumbling with unfamiliar brushes, but slowly improving his technique. Eyes lined and shadowed, lips glossed to a shine, he stared at his reflection in wonder. Gracie stared back, a small smile playing at the corners of her mouth. It became a regular indulgence, stealing moments here and there to explore this new side of himself. Sometimes he'd dress up fully, twirling in front of the mirror in outfits ordered discreetly online. Other times, it was just a swipe of lip gloss, a secret thrill hidden beneath his everyday clothes. As the weeks turned to months, Xander found himself grappling with questions of identity he'd never considered before. Was this just a phase, a bit of harmless fun? Or was Gracie more than just a character he played? He threw himself into research, reading countless articles and forum posts about gender identity and expression. The more he learned, the more he recognized himself in the stories of others who had struggled with similar questions. Through it all, thoughts of Chris lingered. Xander had all but convinced himself that night had been a beautiful dream, a once-in-a-lifetime experience. But late at night, when sleep eluded him, he'd pull out his phone and stare at Chris's number, finger hovering over the call button. It was on one such sleepless night, nearly 6 months after their first encounter, that Xander finally worked up the courage to reach out. Heart-pounding, he typed out a simple message. "Hi, Chris, it's Gracie. I know it's been a while, but I can't stop thinking about you. Would you like to meet for coffee sometime?" He hit send before he could second-guess himself, then tossed the phone aside and buried his face in his pillow. What had he done? The reply came faster than he'd expected, his phone buzzing insistently. With trembling hands, he read Chris's response. "Gracie, I was beginning to think I'd imagined you. I'd love to see you again. How about tomorrow afternoon?" They arranged to meet at a small cafe downtown. Xander spent hours agonizing over his appearance, wanting everything to be perfect. In the end, he opted for an understated look, subtle makeup, a flowy blouse, and dark jeans that hugged his curves. As he approached the cafe, he spotted Chris waiting outside. The sight of him, just as handsome as Xander remembered, sent butterflies swooping through his stomach. Chris's face lit up as he caught sight of Gracie. He enveloped her in a warm hug, the familiar scent of his cologne bringing back a rush of memories. "You look amazing," Chris said as they settled at a table. "I was starting to think I dreamed you up." Gracie laughed, some of the tension easing from her shoulders. "I'm very real, I assure you. I'm sorry it took me so long to get in touch. I had some things to figure out." Chris reached across the table, taking Gracie's hand in his. "I'm just glad you did. I haven't been able to stop thinking about you." They fell into easy conversation, catching up on the months they'd been apart. Chris told her about his job as an architect, his eyes lighting up as he described his latest project. Gracie shared carefully edited anecdotes from her own life, always dancing around the subject of her true identity. As their coffee cups emptied and the afternoon light began to fade, Chris broached the subject they'd both been avoiding. "Gracie," he said softly, "I really like you. I'd love to see where this could go, but I can't help feeling like there's something you're not telling me." Gracie's heart raced. This was the moment of truth. She took a deep breath, steeling herself for what was to come. "You're right," she admitted. "There is something I need to tell you, but not here. Can we go somewhere more private?" Chris nodded, concern evident in his eyes. They paid for their coffee and walked to a nearby park, finding a secluded bench beneath a sprawling oak tree. Gracie's hands twisted nervously in her lap as she struggled to find the right words. Chris waited patiently, his steady presence a comfort, even as anxiety threatened to overwhelm her. "Chris," she began, "the night we met, it wasn't exactly what you think. I wasn't always—" The words stuck in her throat. How could she explain something she was still trying to understand herself? Chris squeezed her hand encouragingly. "Whatever it is, Gracie, you can tell me. I care about you." Those simple words gave her the strength to continue. Taking a deep breath, she launched into the whole story. The bet, the unexpected revelation, the months of soul-searching that followed. "The truth is," she finished, voice barely above a whisper, "I was born male. Gracie started as a costume, but she's become so much more than that. I'm still figuring it all out, but I know that when I'm with you, as Gracie, I feel more like myself than I ever have before." She fell silent, unable to meet Chris's eyes. The moment stretched out interminably as she waited for his reaction. Finally, Chris spoke. "Gracie, or should I call you Xander?" "Gracie," she said firmly. "When I'm like this, I'm Gracie." Chris nodded. "Gracie, then, thank you for trusting me with this. I can only imagine how difficult it must have been to tell me." Gracie looked up, shocked by the lack of anger or disgust in his voice. "You're not mad?" Chris shook his head, a small smile playing at his lips. "Mad? No. Surprised, certainly. But Gracie, the person I've gotten to know over these past months, your kindness, your wit, your passion, that's real. The package it comes in doesn't change how I feel about you." Tears welled up in Gracie's eyes, spilling over before she could stop them. Chris pulled her close, stroking her hair as she cried into his shoulder. "It's okay," he murmured. "We'll figure this out together." As her sobs subsided, Gracie pulled back to look at Chris. "You really mean that? You still want to be with me, even knowing—" Chris cupped her face in his hands, thumbs gently wiping away the last of her tears. "Gracie, I want to be with you because of who you are, not in spite of it. This doesn't change anything for me. If anything, it makes me admire you even more for having the courage to be true to yourself." Gracie's heart swelled with emotion. For so long, she'd feared this moment, dreaded the inevitable rejection she was sure would come if anyone learned her secret. But here was Chris, looking at her with nothing but love and acceptance in his eyes. "So," Chris said, a mischievous glint in his eye, "does this mean I get to take you shopping? Because I've got to say, your fashion sense is impeccable." Gracie burst out laughing, the last of the tension draining away. "I think that can be arranged, but fair warning, I can be quite the shopaholic when unleashed." Chris grinned, pulling her close. "Bring it on, I'm up for the challenge." As they walked hand in hand through the park, making plans for their next date, Gracie felt a profound sense of peace settle over her. For the first time in her life, she felt truly seen and accepted for who she was. All parts of her. The journey ahead would not be easy. There were still many conversations to be had, explanations to be given to friends and family. But with Chris by her side, Gracie felt ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. She squeezed his hand, smiling up at him. "Thank you," she said softly. Chris returned the smile, bringing their joined hands to his lips for a gentle kiss. "For what?" "For seeing me," Gracie replied. "The real me." In the weeks that followed, Gracie and Chris became inseparable. They explored the city together, from quiet cafes to bustling markets, each date a new adventure. Gracie's initial fears about public outings were quickly dispelled. With Chris by her side, she felt invincible. One evening, as they strolled along the riverfront, the setting sun painting the sky in hues of gold and crimson, Chris pulled Gracie close. "You know," he murmured, his voice a low rumble in her ear, "I've been thinking." Gracie looked up at him, her eyes reflecting the dance of colors across the water. "About what?" Chris hesitated, a slight smile playing on his lips. "About us. About how much I want to be with you, all the time." Thanks for watching. The rest won't be viewable on YouTube, so check out Patreon if you want more. I hope you have a wonderful day, my cutie.